All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to create you guys to be more of a thumbnail for me. All right. Okay. Okay, so I know that your group was sent out, I can't see myself now. We put out a Wisconsin Honeybee Pest Management Options Sheet. It's updated every single year. And basically, one side of it just deals with varroa mite treatments. For anyone who was in the club last year when I came, I handed these out to everyone. This is our updated one for this year. It's pretty similar to last year's. There's just a couple changes, Hopscard 3, and Fumagellin B is back on the market on the back side, but other than that, it's pretty similar to last year's, but it has been updated. So my PowerPoint presentation tonight, going through the varroa mite treatments, it's just going to go right down this list here. So if you wanted to take notes on it, feel free. And like I said, the state updates it every year. So we're going to go forward with that. And I just want to say it's really great to see all you guys again. I really enjoyed my time in Green Bay, visiting your hives last year. Really enjoyed my time with your club. You guys are very warm, very welcoming, and I love how focused your club is on education. So I think you guys are really lucky to be part of this club and to have access to all of these great resources that your leadership team is putting together for you. So really take advantage of that, because there are a lot of clubs that do not provide this kind of support for their members. And I'm not saying anything bad about them, but you guys really are lucky to be part of this organization. So, and then I have my contact information here on the first screen. You guys are in my territory. Right now I am the only inspector in the state, so I am a little bit spread thin. But if you have a question on something, feel free, send me an email, give me a call. It might take me just a little bit of time to get back to you, and I apologize that ahead of time. Emails are really nice, especially if you want to send pictures. So just keep that in mind. All right. And another thing that's new this year is we actually produced a survey, and we would like people to take the survey and just kind of let us know, how big is your operation? What are your practices? These presentations that I'm giving, are they helpful? Are they helping you make a management plan? Are they helping you improve your hive health? And that's just something that they're looking at down in Madison to see, are we reaching people effectively? Is there something we could be doing more? And we also are really curious for beekeepers in the state, what exactly they're doing in their own hives, and what kind of treatment options they are doing or they are choosing not to do. So if you go to the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture website, and in the search box, you just type in apiary, you pop up on our apiary page, you'll find the link and click on it. And you can see the survey link is down here in the corner. And if you click on it, it takes 2 or 3 minutes to complete, so it's not a very long survey. Okay, so we're gonna get right into it here. All right, oops, we're gonna go back. All right, so one thing I really want to stress, and it's the reason that you guys are all here, but it's really important as beekeepers, it's really important for the health of your hives to make varroa mite control a priority. If varroa mite control is not a priority in your hive, your bees are going to suffer. They're not going to make it through the winter, they're not going to be healthy. But the biggest problem is if you are letting your varroa mites be unchecked and unmanaged, you are also creating a problem for your neighbor. And that's something that we don't think about. Is we like to point the fingers at pesticides, and we like to point fingers at other people for why our bees are not healthy or they're not producing as much honey as you think they should. But there's a lot of things that you cannot control in beekeeping. So I really encourage beekeepers to focus on what you can control. And what you can control are what is going on in your hive. What treatments are you putting in your hive? What are you doing in your hive to control the mites? how are you protecting your neighbors by making sure that your bees are healthy? Because there are a lot of beekeepers in the Brown County area. You guys are all really close to each other. So you're not beekeeping just by yourself. You're in a community of beekeepers. And that's why it's important. Not only are you keeping your hives healthy, but you are helping your neighbor keep their hives healthy by not creating a problem for them. And just to back me up, I found this quote in the American Bee Journal just in April, and I really enjoy this gentleman, Jamie Ellis. I don't know if any of you guys came to the conference last fall down in, where were we, Appleton or south of Appleton, and down in the southeast part of the state. And he actually came and spoke to the club and talked about mating and everything. And he's from the University of Florida, and he's just really well spoken. And the quote by him in the American Bee Journal is, "We know that the varroa mites harm bees in 3 ways. They feed on the bee fat bodies, they vector pathogens that harm bees, and they also force beekeepers to use chemicals to control varroa. And many of these products have been shown to impact bees negatively in some way." And that is especially true if you are not following the label and you are not putting these treatments in your hives correctly. That's when you get these negative effects on the bees. And that's why we're talking about this today as well, because how are you as a beekeeper supposed to be properly monitoring your varroa mites if you don't understand what these treatments are, how they work, or how you're supposed to be putting them in your hive? So that's what we're talking about today. And then his quote just goes on to say, "As a result, every beekeeper should make it a priority to stay up to date on the latest varroa control measures and do whatever it takes within the realm of legal options," because we're going to talk about that too, "to control this devastating pest." So, and that's why we're all here today to talk about this. All right, and then I also wanted to break down our seasons a little bit, because that is something that I find confuses a lot of beekeepers. When do you know if you're in spring? When is summer? Early fall, late fall, winter? You know, we throw down these terms a lot, but all these terms mean something different to every person. So it's trying to get on the same page of what these terms mean. So your spring is what we're in right now. It's the pre-honey flow. Temps are variable. We're kind of all over the board. Though we are getting warmer now, it's topsy-turvy a little bit. So not as many flowers are blooming, and you probably are feeding right now. Summertime is when your honey flow starts. Flowers are blooming, bees are flying regularly. And one thing I like to point out to people too is that, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, but in my opinion, when it comes to a management standpoint, summer isn't necessarily when you put your honey supers on. Summer is when the honey flow starts. And sometimes the honey flow starts and you do want to get your honey supers on right away, but maybe your hive isn't quite ready for that yet. Well, it's still important to know that you are in the summer months when it comes to, say, a treatment such as Apivar. That is a 42-day treatment that needs to come off 14 days before the honey flow. So this is the kind of stuff that I want you to be thinking about when you're creating your management plan for varroa mites this year. Early fall is after your honey has been removed. And so early fall is what's kind of unique about early fall is, like spring and summer, that can fluctuate from year to year. Early fall, though, is always mid-August, because that is when your honey should be removed from your hives. You need to give your bees enough time in the fall to make sure that, yes, we have been trying to keep them healthy throughout the year, but this is your time to really make sure that your bees are healthy, your queen is laying really well still, there's enough food that they're starting to store in there, you don't have any brood diseases that you're dealing with. And so early fall is kind of that mid-August range, because you should be taking your honey off and harvesting it at this time. Your days are still warm. You may start feeding at this point, depending on the year, depending on what's happening in your area. And then late fall, cooler days, temps are variable, you're no longer feeding. That's, you might not have wrapped your hive yet, but you know that you're going to be wrapping your hive soon for the winter time. And then winter, of course, cold. But one thing I want to point out with winter is you do get that random 50-degree day sometimes in February, definitely in March. And can you treat the varroa mite on that day? Because if it's warm enough, your queen is starting to lay in that hive. and she is starting to create brood. And if brood is growing and hatching, the varroa mites that are in your hive are also multiplying and coming out and reproducing. And so I get a lot of calls from people that had a lot of food left, my bees were really strong, and all of a sudden, boom, they died. What happened? And I always ask, did you have some warm temperatures? Were you able to get out with your oxalic acid vaporizer, vaporize your hive one more time? Because that could have been what saved your bees. That's not always the case, but that is something I want more beekeepers to start thinking about. Just because you wrap your bees up for the winter doesn't necessarily mean that you're done with them for the year. So that's just something to think about. So when I'm talking about the seasons, that's more of what I'm referencing. Okay, and another thing I want to mention is, oops, oh, I'm getting trigger happy here with my mouth. The label is the law. And so this presentation and the handout that you have, the Wisconsin Honey Bee Pest Management Options Guide, these are meant to be guides. They are not the law. Because what can happen if the manufacturer updates their labels quicker than we update either my slideshow or our handout, you need to follow the label that comes with your product. And it's really important for you to read the entire label because the label is the law. Another thing I want to point out is if there aren't guidelines on the label for honeybee hive management, is the product the correct choice? And the answer is no, because if it hasn't been approved for use in your honeybee hive, then don't use it. There's a reason, either they're still doing research on it or it just hasn't been approved for one reason or another. And then I also listed just again our website, the DATCP, that's Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. If you Google, though, Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, you'll find our website. And like I said before, if you type honeybee or apiary in the search engine, we have a lot of really great resources for you on our website that can help you figure out hive issues. All right, so we are going to jump onto the sheet now, and we're going to start with synthetic chemicals. And that's another thing I really like about this handout is there are some people out there that don't want to put any synthetic chemicals in their hive, and that's fine. And what's great is that Wisconsin has broken them up between synthetic chemicals, organic acids, and essential oils. So if you don't want to put synthetic chemicals in your hive, you have other options that we're going to go through that you don't have to do that. So the first two treatments on your handout, you can see they're blacked out. It's Apistan and Checkmate Plus. That's on our list of do not use because those have been shown that the varroa mite has developed a resistance to these two treatments. Unfortunately, you can still find these treatments in some stores. So that's just something to be aware of. What is the product that you're buying? And we recommend not purchasing Apistan and not purchasing Checkmate Plus for the use of managing varroa mites in your hive. Another one which is not on our list is Tactic, and it's illegal in all 50 states. It's illegal in the entire United States. It's not just a Wisconsin thing. I know that people use it. They're not supposed to use it. And so I just try to educate people. Tactic has the potential to poison humans and also to cause cancer in humans. It's illegal. So please do not put it in your hives because you're exposing yourself, you're exposing the inspector when they come out to your hives. And so I just ask you, please follow the law and don't use illegal products. All right, so our Apivar strips. The Apivar, the main ingredient is amitraz. It is a pesticide that is designed to kill members of the tick and mite family. And that's where you can put it in your hive and it's not going to necessarily affect your bees poorly because it's designed specifically to attack ticks and mites and not your honeybees. And how it works is it paralyzes the varroa mite, which then drops off the bee, and the mite then starves to death. Amitraz is on the surface of the strips. I'm sorry if I don't have a picture on the screen, okay. The amitraz is on the surface of the strips. Bees come in contact with the amitraz, and then they spread it through the colony from bee to bee. After a short period of time, the amitraz undergoes a chemical breakdown and disappears from the hive. I'm gonna just, I don't know if that little box is in anyone's way, but I just minimized it. So Apivar strips, it's recommended that you use them in the early spring. And when I say early spring, I mean early spring, because it is a 42-day treatment. So if you do choose to use this treatment, this would be something that you would put in your hive the very first day that you can get back into your hive. It's effective because it's a 42-day treatment. It means it's effective for multiple varroa mite reproductive cycles, and that's the benefit of it. It's also a treatment that you could put in the fall after your honey supers have been removed. It can be used 2 times per year. So that's something to keep in mind too. You don't want to be using this 3 times. It should only be used in your hive 2 times per year. And you can see the strips here for anyone who's never used this product before. Comes in a little package, you open it up and you've got these strips that just look like pieces of plastic. And there's actually a little hook on the end of the top of this piece of plastic, and you hang it in between the frames in your brood chamber. But remember, it's important. It has to be in contact with your bees. They have to go across it. And that's why it needs to hang down between the frames in the brood chamber. Okay. And one argument I get a lot is, why is Tactic illegal, but Apivar strips are not? Because both of them, the main ingredient is amitraz. And the reason behind that is Apivar strips are a 42-day treatment, which means they're a slow release treatment in your hive, where a tactic treatment is like an amitraz bomb that you set off in your hive and then walk away. Amitraz is not a substance that you want to be messing around with. It is a dangerous poison. Do not illegally apply, aka don't use tactic. Don't put yourself at risk. And then there's some thought to amitraz, is the varroa mite becoming resistant to that? Because amitraz is a product that has been used quite extensively in honeybee colonies across the entire nation. And so 2 interesting articles that came out by Randy Oliver, one was back in 2017, the other one is 2014. And they just kind of talk about different research that's being done on amitraz. Now, I'm not saying don't use Apivar strips. I've used them myself. They have worked for me and they have not worked for me. But that's why it's important to always monitor your hives before you put a treatment on and after. And that's through a powdered sugar roll or an alcohol wash, because you need to know if you're putting this treatment in your hive, is it going to be effective? Because you put a treatment in your hive, it might not be effective, but then you know, and you can choose something else to put in your hive. So that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to this amitraz treatment, the Apivar strips. All right, so now we're going to go into organic acids. And you are probably more familiar with the organic acids category. I find that most beekeepers are using the products to control mites in this category. And so this next one is going to be Hopscard 2 and Hopscard 3. Now, Hopscard 3 is brand new on the market this year. And while putting this presentation together, I searched and searched for specific information on Hopscard 3, and I really didn't find anything specific. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit. For the most part, though, I'm going to be referencing back to Hopscard 2. But just know that Hopscard 3 is on the market. I'm assuming it's very similar to Hopscard 2. And so if you're putting it in your management plan, think of putting it in probably along the same lines as Hopscard 2. So Hopscard 2 and Hopscard 3 are a miticide. So it's an agent used to kill mites. It's created from hops, the potassium salt of hops beta acids. And I think this is a pretty neat treatment in the sense of, so this was interesting to learn. Hops contain 2 prominent organic acids, alpha acids, known to brewers as flavor hops, and beta acids, known as aroma hops. It is the beta acids that have been found to have anti-varroa properties, and that's what they use to create the Hopscard 2 and 3. So Hopscard 2 specifically, it's best to use with little to no brood, and that's only because it doesn't penetrate capped brood. So this is a great treatment to use in the springtime, but the catch with it is your daytime temperatures should be above 50 degrees if you are using this treatment. So it can't be a super early spring treatment because, I mean, we just turned on the heat not that many days ago, you know, so that's something to play around with. Or if you would pick up a swarm, or if you would acquire a new package, because your swarms and your new packages, they don't have any brood. So this would be a great option to use if if you were going to pick something like that up. It is a 30-day treatment, so that's something else to keep in mind. But the difference with this HopsGuard 2 versus the Apivar strips is that HopsGuard 2 is actually okay to use when your honey supers are on. It is acceptable to use. But, and this is a big but, it is recommended not to harvest the honey or the wax from the brood chamber if you used HopsGuard 2. And here's a direct quote. Even the product is not in the and you're
Uh-oh.
Yeah, did we just lose our connection? I wasn't sure if it was me or her.
Oh,
It looks-
let's see if we can get her.
I think I said everything I wanted to about HopsGuard 2. Hangs down between the frames, 50 degrees. Oh, another point I wanted to make on this one, though, that I don't think I did. This is why it's so important for beekeepers to be keeping records. Because a lot of times I get calls from people, my bees died over the winter time, there's still a lot of honey in there, can I eat the honey? And the questions I always ask them are, what treatments have you put in your hive? What have you put in your hive? And sometimes people can't tell me because they don't remember. And I tell them, don't chance it then, because that honey could possibly be contaminated. And that's something to keep in mind. If you're using HopsGuard 2, don't harvest the honey or the wax from the brood chamber. It's okay to harvest it from honey supers, but not from the brood chamber. And that's why we just really encourage people to have this management plan, keep notes, so you are aware of what's going on in your hive and how you can manage properly.
Hey, Julie, can you just read off Sarah's quick note that she sent out?
Yep, Sarah's asking everybody, because we're trying to take roll attendance, so she is, to please click on the frame and select, okay, it says, can the people who do not have their names showing on their picture tile, please click on the frame and select rename. Then add your name so she can take attendance. She doesn't know who is listed as iPhone. Sue Charlotte, can you help out?
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, April. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. All right, so the next one we're going to talk about is the Formic Pro, and I put it together, Formic Pro and Mite. We're going to talk about them separately as well, but they're very similar products made by the same company. Their primary ingredient is formic acid, which is an organic acid that is naturally occurring in honey and bee venom already. So it works to kill tracheal mites as well, and that's something that I find really helpful. Tracheal mites, they don't seem to be such a big issue in people's hives anymore. It's something that's at least one issue that's kind of gotten under control and kind of dissipated. So, but the interesting thing is, like, once in a while I go through a hive and I do notice evidence of tracheal mites in that hive, and you see that through K-wing. And this is something that if you're using Formic Pro or Mite Quick Strips already, it's something that you're probably already treating your hive for and you didn't even realize it. So that's kind of another neat aspect of Formic Pro and Mite Quick Strips. It's a continuous low dose release method. And so this is another interesting quote by the manufacturer, but still it's been proven. They have not experienced any young queen loss due to formic acid application since 1995. And that's something that people question about a lot, because they do hear Formic Pro and Mite Quick Strips, they can cause queen mortality or high death within the colony. In my own experience, I'm not going to say that it can't happen, but in my own experience, when I come across a hive that's already pretty sick and these treatments are put on the hives, you do tend to see a higher mortality rate. I've never lost a queen in my own hives. I've used both these treatments in my hives. I do like them a lot. They are great summer treatments, but that's something to keep in mind if your bees are already pretty sick, because we do know that there are 25 different viruses that the varroa mites are inflicting on your bees. So even though your bees might not look sick, if you pay close attention, they could be acting sick. And if you choose to use one of these treatments, you could see mortality within your hive. But those are bees that weren't doing very well anyway, but it's just something to consider when you're putting on a treatment. The best thing about both Formic Pro and Mite Away Quick Strips is it causes mortality to both male and female varroa under the brood cap. So if you've noticed so far, every single treatment I've talked about only works on bees, adult bees, on mites, sorry, not on bees. The treatments work on mites that are already feeding on the adult bees or running around on your wax foundation. They don't penetrate capped brood. And now this is the first treatment that we're going to be talking about, that this kills the mites that are on the adult bees. It kills the mites that are running around your hive, and it also kills the mites that are reproducing under the brood cap. And that's why I think more people tend to use Formic Pro and Mite Away Quick Strips, but we do recommend rotating your treatments every season. And another reason we want to do that is because the Checkmite Plus and the Apistan, the theory is why both of those treatments are now non-effective on varroa mites is because they were used too much and they were used incorrectly. So we really stress use these treatments correctly and rotate through your treatments, because this Formic Pro and Mite Away Quick Strips are fantastic summer treatments because you can use them during the honey flow. You can use them when your honey supers are on. They kill mites that are under the brood cap as well as mites that are running around your hive. So it really encompasses your whole hive. And this is definitely a treatment that we don't want to end up losing for some reason down the road. So the Formic Pro, it's a 14-day treatment or 2 10-day treatments. Like I said, it can be used during the honey flow. So this is our #1 recommended. If you have a varroa mite issue in the summertime, we're going to recommend a Formic Pro treatment or a Mite Away Quick Strip treatment. Do not feed during this treatment. Bees will continue to forage. Do not disturb the hive. Because what this treatment is, I'll move this little box down over here again. You can see there, it comes in a pre-soaked pad that you lay on top of your frames, and they create a vapor inside of your hive. So if you would go into your hive during that treatment time and say pop the lid or replace food or disturb them in any way, you've just lost that vapor out of your hive and your treatment has just left. So you want to make sure that when you put this treatment on, if you choose to do the either the 10-day treatment or the 14-day treatment, that you don't disturb your hive during that treatment time. And another thing that is really important to remember is the daytime temperatures need to be between 50 and 85 degrees. Especially that 85-degree mark is crucial. If your daytime temperatures are going to be above 85 degrees, that's when you're going to see your hive. That's when you're going to see mortality in your hive. It's really hard on your bees. And so that's another thing too, when people say, I put this treatment on and it killed all my bees and I hate this treatment. I ask them, well, okay, how were your bees before that? Okay, what were the temperatures during that treatment time? And if it was anything over 85 degrees, you need to follow the label. You need to follow the instructions that come with the treatment, especially in the first 3 days of treatment. If you're gonna be above 85 degrees in the first 3 days, you're gonna have to wait to treat. Now, if you have put on the 14-day treatment, so it's 2 strips for 14 days solid, and towards the end of that 14-day treatment, all of a sudden you see a spike in temperature, your bees are probably going to be okay. But those first few days of treatment are really critical for temperature. All right, and now this one is the Mite Away Quick Strip. So very similar, like I said, to the Formic Pro. One thing with the Mite Away Quick Strips, though, that is on the label, that's not on the label with the Formic Pro, I don't believe, is that if you do a full dose treatment, so a full 7-day treatment on the Mite Away Quick Strips, which is 2 strips in your hive, you need to allow a minimum of 1 month between applications for your next 7-day treatment. And this is really important, and this is where monitoring comes back into play again, because say you do a powdered sugar roll or an alcohol wash. Say your mite count is at a level where you need to do a treatment. You put your 2 strips on for 7 days. You go back in your hive after 7 days. You take the treatment off. You do a mite count, and your mites are still high. You cannot just go back and do another 7-day treatment on this hive. You need to give them a month of something different, and that something different would be your Hopscard 2. And why I bring that up is sometimes that happens. You sometimes have a hive in your yard that we term hot hives, and that just means that your varroa mite levels seem to be high and you're trying to bring them down, and for some reason you're just really fighting with the varroa mites in that hive. And it can happen. It might not happen, but if it does, you've already got a plan. So if you did the Mite Away Quick Strips for 7 days, you might want to switch over to Hopscard 2 for a little bit and see how that goes. So that's why we're talking about this, because these are important aspects to your management plan. Once again, outside daytime temperature between 50 and 85 degrees. Here I made the note, especially the 92-degree mark during the first 3 days of treatment may cause excessive brood mortality and queen loss, but try to keep their treatment window in that 50 to 85-degree range. And the difference here is the Mite Away Quick Strip is either 2 strips for 7 days, or it's 2 different treatments that take 21 days, and that's 1 strip at each time. And this is an organic vapor action formulated in a pre-soaked pad that lays on top of the hive frames in the brood chamber. And you can kind of see them here in the box on this side. And they are different looking than the Formic Pro. Like, you open up your Formic Pro and it seems to be a stiffer pad, where you open up your Mite Away Quick Strips and it's like this gooey mush in between 2 pieces of paper. Don't remove the paper. The paper needs to stay on the treatment. Do not inhale this treatment because it'll knock you down. And make sure, regardless of the treatments you're using all the proper safety precautions. And then this slide is just to show the differences between the 2 treatments. One great difference is, so the Mite Away Quick Strip has a 12-month shelf life, where the Formic Pro has a 24-month shelf life. And I think that's really a bonus for beekeepers, because sometimes you buy a box, especially if you only have 1 or 2 hives, and you get through the season and you didn't need to use all your treatments. If that's Mite Away Quick Strips, they're not going to be effective next year. But if it is Formic Pro, your Formic Pro could be effective next year. Your Mite Away Quick Strips, like I mentioned, is either a 7-day treatment or a 21-day treatment. Your Formic Pro is a 14-day treatment or a 20-day treatment. And why this is important, people are like, well, why are they still making Mite Away Quick Strips? Because a lot of times your hive has more than one problem. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, I have a bad mite problem. I also have a queen mite problem. So maybe you could get Mite Away Quick Strips in there for a 7-day treatment and then start fixing your queen mite problem. But if you can wait 14 days, maybe you would go with the Formic Pro. So it's just 2 different products that are quite similar, but they offer different aspects of their product to help you in your management plan in the summertime decide what problem is the most critical that needs to be dealt with first. Maybe your queen problem needs to be dealt with first, and then your mite problem. But these products give you options for treatment, and what we love as beekeepers is we love options because they're very helpful to us. Another great difference is, so your Mite Away Quick Strips, they needed to be stored under with a temperature under 77 degrees. So you can't just leave them out in a shed necessarily or leave them in your garage. You have to think about the temperature that they're stored in. Where the Formic Pro, it says it just needs to be stored out of direct sunlight. So there are some really great improvements. However, I do like that 7-day treatment window with Mite Away Quick Strips versus the 14 for Formic Pro.
Hey, April.
Okay. Oh, yes.
This might be a good place to ask a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is, we received many questions about product like Mite Away Quick Strips and Formic Pro that have expired, where they have expired. In some cases, it's delivered. Can we just get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, don't use them, because I believe I read an article that the chemical change within the product could potentially harm your bees and be extremely harmful. So there again, the label is the law. If there's an expiration date, you need to follow the expiration date. if whoever you bought product from sent you a product that's expired, you need to contact them, and you need to get a replacement product, and hopefully they would work with you, because you shouldn't have to buy something that's been expired. Does that answer that question?
Okay, another one. Yeah. With Formic Pro, is treatment dosed per hive or per box?
Per
When you say
hive.
dosage.
You know, that is a good question. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Yes, we got you.
Okay. Okay. So it's by hive, but in that you want to look at how big your hive is. So I believe it's right in the instructions that if, say, you want to put a treatment of this on, but you only have one brood box, not two, you would probably want to go with the one strip, not the two strips. But if you have your traditional 2-story brood box, then you could do 2 strips, or you could just do 1 strip and then another strip. It's all in the labeled instructions. But I did have a beekeeper one year call me up, and he said I killed all of his bees after he used Mite Away quick strips. But the problem was he put 4 strips in, because he read the instructions, but he thought they meant per box, not per hive. But the most you should ever be putting in your hive is 2 strips at a time. Does that answer that question?
I think so,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
One more. Any special? What are the special handling instructions? So any special handling instructions?
So with the Formic Pro and the Mite Away quick strips, you are supposed to be wearing gloves, not just your beekeeping gloves, but like rubber gloves, disposable gloves, and you definitely do not want to inhale it. Now, I don't believe the instructions say that you have to wear a respirator or a mask when you put it on, but just make sure that when you're opening the package, you're opening the package away from yourself. You're not inhaling, you're not downwind of it, because you don't want to get a nose full of that treatment. Any others?
Yeah, I think that is the end of it. Yep.
There was one more question that just came in, Julie.
Okay, let's see.
In case I
Okay,
disappear
with
again.
Formic Pro, my inside cover has an entrance. Should this be removed or blocked?
Yes, but your regular entrance on the bottom needs to be fully opened. But I would recommend blocking your upper entrance for the Formic Pro and the Mite Away quick strip treatment. But the thing is, you'll notice too, when you put the treatment on, your bees are going to exit the hive double quick. And that can stress people out for the first time if they've never used the treatment before. But that's why your bottom entrance needs to be fully open to give the bees access point to get out quickly and hang outside the hive. They will go back in, but that initial burst of fumes in the hive, it can be too much for the bees that are in there, and they get themselves out. They will go back in. The treatment will be effective on them as well, but that just gives them a way to get out quickly without stampeding.
I found a few extra bees laying dead on my bottom board right after a treatment, and
Yeah.
now a few days later, but in the beginning they didn't remove them, they just left them.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
There's one more comment about, I'm a total newbie. Which treatment do I use? So
You mean between the Formic Pro and the Mite Away quick strips?
I think they mean any treatment. How do you pick a treatment?
Well, that's what we're talking about. That. So it depends on the season. It depends on the temperatures. It depends on what you have access to. So it all depends. It depends. Did your bees come through the winter? Are they really heavily infested in mites? It depends. If they came through the winter, you might have different treatment options. If you just picked up a nuke or a package, hopefully they were treated before you picked them up, but that doesn't mean that your treatment worked. So it's still important to do a monitor, a powdered sugar roll, and an alcohol wash, or an alcohol wash to determine what your mite counts are at. And so if you would need to put on a treatment right now, you could either put on a Hopscar 2 treatment, you could put on a Formic Pro or a Mite Away quick strip, but like I said, we do like a different treatment every season. However, if Mite Away Quick Strips or Formic Pro are the only treatments that you have access to right now. It's better to put a treatment on if you need it than to wait for the proper season to put that treatment on, if that makes sense. So we're going to go through the rest of the treatments on the list. Right now, you could also vaporize your hive with oxalic acid at this point because you don't have honey supers on. You could use Apiguard, but we're going to talk about pros and cons of using Apiguard in the springtime. So as we get through the list, especially what's nice on the handout is over on the side, it does give you tentative seasons for using the different treatments. But like I said, some of the treatments might be harder to get a hold of than others. So especially for new beekeepers, it can be overwhelming. But that's why it's important to have your management plan made up ahead of time so that if you do need a treatment spring, summer, fall, late fall, early spring, you already kind of have an idea of what you could or should be using. Does that answer that?
It does, and I would just reiterate, it's important to have a plan. And you sit down and look at, I mean, you have listed there all of the treatments, and you sit down and look at what you can do and you can't do with certain treatments, and what, I mean, like you said, what time of year and what temperature and whether you have your honey supers on or not. It all starts to fall into place of what you can do and when you can do it.
Exactly.
You just have to learn each one of them and just look and see what you can do with them.
Yep.
There's not really that many treatments out there.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So is that, I don't know, because I disappeared before, how I'm doing on time, but am I doing okay on time? Are we?
We got about 15 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Okay. So, so the next treatment we're going to talk about is oxalic acid. And we're still technically in the organic acids. So this is also a naturally occurring acid. You find it in honey. It's actually what makes rhubarb leaves poisonous. The acid works by direct contact with the varroa mite attached to the adult bee. And that direct contact is important for application. And then I just put down here on the side note, please do not use rhubarb leaves in your hive to treat the varroa mite. Because that was the big thing last summer. I found that I'd ask people, what are they doing? And I clipped my rhubarb leaves and put them in the hive. And I said, well, did you do a monitor to find out if it had any effect on your mites whatsoever? No. So just because you put something in your hive doesn't mean it's going to work. And the problem with the rhubarb leaves, what is the quantity of oxalic acid in there? How is it being released into your hive? How do you know if it's being released with enough potency to even do anything with your mites? So that's why we really encourage people, keep to the list. The list is there for a reason. These products have been tested in labs. They have been proven to be effective at eradicating your varroa mites and not harming your bees. So just please keep to the list and don't do all kinds of experiments in your hive until you become more experienced as a beekeeper. And then maybe if you want to do some experiments with legal products, that's up to you. But you also need to be monitoring to find out if your experiments are working. The only other thing I would mention on that, though, is you don't want to always be giving too low of a dosage, because that's also going to help the varroa mite become resistant to a treatment. And this list is all we have right now for controlling our varroa mites. So please keep to the proper dosage. And I will get off my soapbox and move on because I only have 15 minutes. So oxalic acid is best to use when there's little to no brood, because once again, we're in the category of does not penetrate capped brood. So this is going to work on your mites that are feeding on your adult bees that are running around in your wax, but not in with the mites that are multiplying with your brood. Do not treat during the honey flow or with honey supers on. The only 3 treatments that you can use when your honey supers are on are your Hopsguard 2 or your Hopsguard 3, your Formic Pro, and your Mite Away Quick Strips. That is it for, I can't, highlight, underline that in your brain. Those are the only treatments when your honey supers are on, nothing else. Because people are like, oh, I took my honey supers off for a day, I used the oxalic acid, and then I put them back on. Please don't do that either, because bees are moving nectar and honey throughout the hive. And if they stored something down in the brood chamber that you treated with this product that affected your honey, and then they moved it up into your honey super, you know, like you have a problem. Now you have contaminated honey up in your honey super and you don't even know it. So just please follow the proper seasons, the proper timeline for your treatments. So anyway, so yeah, don't use this during the honey flow, but this is a really great late fall treatment or early spring treatment. If you get a broodless package, this is a great treatment to use. If you pick up a swarm, this is a great treatment to use on that swarm while you're installing them into your hive. There are two methods that I recommend using. One is the dribble method, and basically you mix up a solution, it's a liquid solution, and you literally dribble it onto your bees. But what's important, remember, the oxalic acid has to directly come in contact with the bees. So you need to dribble it directly onto your bee cluster. You cannot put it on your equipment. It will not be effective on the frames. It's only effective if it touches the bees. And then the other method is the vaporizing method, which you need to use a machine. And if you see the picture on this slide, this is an example of what the machine, the wand looks like, where you would put the acid in the end of this. It vaporizes it and puts it into your hive. So, oops. The machine, let's see, it's a good treatment option for, like I said, for cool temperatures and poor weather conditions, because you don't need to open up your hive to do this treatment. So late in the fall, like November, when your bees aren't really flying anymore, you know there isn't any brood in there, it hasn't snowed yet, you haven't quite wrapped up your hive yet, that is a wonderful time to get in there, do this treatment, knock down any mites that are still in there, and help your bees stay healthy through the winter time. Okay, and I put this slide in, and this is a slide I added since I sent you the presentation, but I have been getting a lot more questions on the fog method, and I don't condone it, the state doesn't condone it, but a lot of people are thinking about using it. And I found this quote also in the American Bee Journal in April, which is so timed so well. And it's from a gentleman from the University of Florida. His name is Cameron Jack, and he just writes, "The issue I have with the fogger is that you do not actually know how much oxalic acid you are actually putting into the hive. You are just guessing. Where the vaporization, the vaporizing or the dribble method allows complete control on how much oxalic acid is going in your hive. And one thing we know as beekeepers, like I said before, there's so much that is out of our control. With beekeeping, this is something you can control. And I don't know if it just means I have control issues, but if there is something I can control in my hive, I am going to do it. Because one, if you're using this in the late fall or early spring, it's really critical times in your hive. And so why are you going to use a method that you're not really sure if it's being effective or not in your hive? Use the vapor method, you know it's going to be effective. On that though, on a side note, if you do have a lot of comb that's hanging on the bottom of your frames, you can actually start your hive on fire. So that's just something to be aware of when you are putting your wand in your hive, is you want to always be cleaning out the bottom of your frames when possible so that you don't accidentally set your hive on fire. Okay, so now we're going to go into essential oils, and our first one in essential oils is called Apigard. And the main ingredient in Apigard is thymol, which is also naturally occurring. It provides the distinctive flavor in the herb thyme and also the native wildflower bee balm. The Apigard acts as a vapor. It will only kill mites on adult bees. Once again, it does not penetrate capped brood. And it comes in a gel form, in a gel tray. Now, some people have also asked me about, you can get it in crystal or powder form, but the problem with that is, so the gel form, which comes in the tray, which is Apigard, will give a controlled release. In crystal or powder form, if the weather is cold, the crystals do not sublime quickly enough and the mites are not controlled. But if it's too hot, the crystals will sublime too quickly, shocking the bees into absconding and often killing bee brood. And so here's again, and just another example of these treatments that you purchase, they have been formulated properly. Please use them properly. Try to stay away from doing a lot of the experiments with other products that other beekeepers are sometimes talking about. Okay. And you can see here in this picture, this is what the tray looks like when it comes, and this is how it looks like when it's open, and this is the gel sitting in the tray, and you just lay it on top of the frames in your hive. So this is a great early fall treatment, and remember that is after your honey supers have come off, because the daytime temperature still needs to be above 60 degrees. The bees need to be active in order for this treatment to work. The reason why, now we do have it listed as this is possible to use as a spring treatment, but what they have found in their research is that sometimes it can cause the queen to stop laying for short periods of time. So you can use it in the spring, but you might not want to, because it could stop your queen from laying, and that's detrimental to your hive because you're trying to build up your population in the springtime. So that's just something to consider when you're looking at which treatments to use. And then also, you're not supposed to feed while this treatment is on your hives. And that's why it's another good early fall treatment if you would need one, because you might not be feeding quite yet in the early fall. Because in order for this treatment to work, the bees have to remove the gel from the tray and carry it through the hive. And as they carry it through the hive, it goes through sublimation and it vaporizes, and that vapor gets kind of around in the hive, and that's how it works. But if you're feeding at the same time, what they've found is that the bees tend to go towards the feed and not towards the gel. And so if they don't take the gel out of the tray, then it wasn't effective for you. And you also need to close your screen bottom board during this treatment. Okay, and the next and last treatment I'm going to talk about, 6 minutes, is Apolife Var. And this is another treatment. The main ingredient is thymol. And you can see in this picture, it actually comes in tabs. And you break the tabs into 4 pieces. And you can see this picture here, you would put 1 piece in each corner of the brood chamber. So this is another great treatment to use in, say, the early fall after the honey supers have been removed. Close your screen bottom boards, again on this one. Temperatures should be between 64 and 95 degrees. So here's a question I sometimes get. Say you picked up a swarm, you're not going to get any honey from the swarm. You're just, you picked it up midsummer. That's where you can kind of play around with some of these treatments as well. If you know you're not harvesting anything from the hive, they're too small, they're just trying to build up a population. If you didn't have access to like an oxalic acid vaporizer or some of the other treatments, you could possibly use that treatment at this time too. But if you have honey supers on your hive, this would not be a treatment to use at that time. And with this treatment, 3 applications are necessary at 7 to 10 day intervals, because once again, it does not penetrate capped brood. And so when you see that timetable of you have to put multiple treatments on back to back, that's because as your brood hatches out, they're hatching out with varroa mites. And so this treatment is trying to hit different stages, different life cycles of the varroa mite, different brood as they're coming out of the brood chamber. And then I just want to touch base real quick on integrated pest management practices. So like I said, we want you to be changing up your treatments through the season. Don't just rely on one treatment year round from year to year. Change up your treatments. We encourage people to introduce hygienic queens or more hygienic bees. That could be your Minnesota Hygienics. Purdue University, I believe, came out with a mite biter queen. Russian bees tend to be more hygienic bees, even though they're very angry bees. And so you have to choose for yourself what type of bee is going to work well on your property with you as a beekeeper. I love my Italians. My Italians have been very hygienic for me. Even though they haven't necessarily been bred for hygienic behavior, I've really lucked out and had really good, high quality hygienic bees in my Italians. So but we do encourage people, if you do need to requeen, try to pick a queen that has hygienic traits that have been specifically bred into her, because it's going to help your bees stay clean, it's going to help your hives stay clean, and it's going to help them fight a lot of the different brood diseases. Screen bottom boards are great because when the bees are sloughing off mites, the mites fall through the screen, they fall out of the hive. Remove drone comb, especially in the summertime. especially if you're not trying to raise your own queens in your hives, you purchase a queen to put in your hives, you really don't have any point of drones. I'm not saying kill all of them, like we're not having a drone genocide, because you might need to raise a queen, but when you get that frame that's primarily drone comb, or if you specifically put in a frame for the bees to create drone comb, that's a great way to remove a high population of mites from your hive. But what's important with that, if you specifically put in drone comb, you need to make sure that you are removing it before the drones hatch out. Because if you just put that drone comb frame in there and you let the drones all hatch out, then they just came out with a bunch of mites in your hive. So that's something, when you're managing your bees, you need to be managing them fully throughout the whole process. Otherwise, your treatment or your technique isn't going to be effective. Split your hives. That's a great way of having a brood break and keeping naturally reducing your varroa mite levels. In that though, if you do a split and you introduce a queen right away, you don't have that brood break, so you're not going to have that mite suppression. So that's something to keep in mind. Varroa mite checks. I know you guys are going to go through a whole class on powdered sugar rolls and alcohol washes. Do your varroa mite checks. We recommend you doing them once a month, but if you're doing powdered sugar rolls and it's not a humid day, you could do them every time you're in there checking your bees. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, if you do quite a few of them and you keep getting zeros, you know, maybe take a little break for a while, just keep monitoring your mite levels. But it's really important for those mite levels to be checked constantly throughout the season. Otherwise, you have no idea where you're at with your mite levels. Another thing about removing the drone comb, I like to take my uncapping scraper and I like to pop the drones out, the drone brood, and I like to look at them to see how many mites came out with my drone brood. And so you can kind of get a check of how many mites are on your adult bees right now and how many mites are locked away with your brood. And so looking at both aspects is really important with your monitoring. Location can be so important. Now, if you don't have any options for changing your location, then you're going to be a little more limited. But say you know that there is mite issues in your area, if you can remove your bees to a new area, that might be really helpful. So think about that. Think about sunshine. Think about too much shade. Think about too much moisture. Those are things that are going to put stressors on your hives. And so if you are in a really shady, wet location, your bees are always going to be sick. You're always going to be dealing with brood issues. So think about where you're placing your hive. Is there enough ventilation? Are they getting enough sunlight? Early morning sun is crucial. Late day sun is crucial. My bees sit out in a field all day. They're in the sun all day and they do really well. So that's something to think about with your bees as well. If you want to give them a little shade in the afternoon, fantastic. Just make sure that your hives are dry and there's not excessive moisture in your hives. Food availability is huge.
April, can I interrupt 1 second? Can you explain what a brood break is?
Okay, so a brood break is when you're preventing your queen from laying eggs. So there's even a new trend where people are starting to capture their queens. So they're not doing a split, but they're capturing their queens and they're actually putting her in a cage. And they're keeping her in her cage and they're preventing her from laying eggs. And what that does then is it breaks up your brood cycle. So your mites can't just jump into the next, as when they come out with the generation of brood, they can't just jump in with the next generation that's getting capped. You've created this break in your brood cycle where you're not going to have any brood being laid. I don't know that I necessarily recommend, unless you have a really steady hand, of catching your queen and recaging her and keeping her in a cage, because you have the chance of really damaging her. But if you feel confident in doing that, that could be an option for you as well. Does that answer that question on a brood break?
Anybody else not understand what a brood break is? I think you're good to go.
Okay. All right. So then food availability.
So April, because I'm okay to go past 8, but I don't know if everybody else is. So.
Oh, is 8 my cutoff? Sorry, I thought it was 8:30.
No, it's 8. But if you want to keep going, we'd love to have you keep going. And then anyone that can make it, you're welcome to stay. But if you feel like you have to drop off, that's okay too.
Okay, and I am close to the end. So
okay.
I think I only have a couple more slides. But the most important stuff, like just going through the different treatments, like we have covered that for anyone who does have to go. So anyway, like food availability is very important because that's a huge stress on a hive. And with the next point, reducing hive stress. Your biggest hive stressors are your varroa mites, your food availability, moisture, and that could even just be access to water. Because your bees do need a lot of water in the hive, but you don't want a wet hive. You don't want like rainwater washing into your hive. You don't want them to be in an area that they can never get the hive dry. You want them to bring the water in when they need it. You don't want them to constantly be fighting moisture inside of the hive. So reducing those stressors, you're going to have healthier bees in the long run. And then just touching base on what the mite checks are. It's important to monitor mite levels and act before mite populations are too high, because here in Wisconsin, especially for people that are overwintering their bees in Wisconsin, you don't want to be playing catch up throughout the summer. You want to keep your mite levels low and under control throughout the entire season. Because one thing I really like to push is that you're not getting bees ready for winter in the fall. You're actually getting your bees ready for the winter right now, in the springtime. And you're doing that by keeping your bees healthy throughout the entire year so that you're going into the winter with healthy bees. If you're going into the winter with sick bees, they're not going to make it. They're going to have a lot of problems, even if they do make it in the springtime. And so just keeping that in mind is here in Wisconsin, we are getting our bees ready for winter even now. And that's why your mite checks are really important. You can either do a powdered sugar roll or an alcohol wash, which your club is going to demonstrate to you. And you want to do that with a half a cup of bees. That's your sample, is that your half a cup of bees. It roughly equals 300 bees. At the state level, if I would come out to your hives and do a mite check for you, if I find 3 mites in that half a cup of bees, I'm going to recommend either a treatment or some sort of action to be taken place against your varroa mites. Here in Wisconsin, we're really aggressive. A lot of times people are like, if you see 3 mites in 100 bees, wait, do I have that backwards? No, not 1 mite. I'm just having a brain fart. If you see, it comes out to if you see 9 mites in half a cup of bees, that's when you need to do your treatment. But here we promote, if we see 3 mites in a half a cup of bees, do a treatment. So it is a little more aggressive on that. But what I have found, especially with the viruses that are being found between the varroa mites and the bees, is that sometimes I'm doing a mite check and I'm at a level of a 4 or 5 and I'm already seeing the colony collapse. Sometimes I do a mite check and I'm seeing 12 to 15 and the hive seems to be doing okay. But it all depends on what viruses your varroa mites are inflicting on your bees. And we don't know. There's so many different ones. And so you never know. And so that's why we encourage people to be really aggressive with their mite populations. Keep your mite levels low throughout the entire year. Your bees are going to be healthier. They're going to come through the winter really well. That aggressiveness on your end is really going to help protect your bees. And this is a great tool put out by the Honeybee Health Coalition. If you go to their website and you find their Varroa Management Decision Tool, it takes you step by step and helps you figure out which treatment is right for you. So this is what it looks like when you get on their page and you click on the Get Started. And then it's going to take you through like 5 to 7 different questions about, do you need a treatment? Are you open to synthetic chemicals or just organic? Is brood present? And then by the time you get done answering all of your questions, the next screen that pops up is this one, and it has all of your treatments listed. And actually what's really neat, if you click on the treatment itself, it gives you a fact sheet based on that treatment and even provides you with a video that you can watch on how to put that treatment in your hive. And so that's great, especially for new beginners, new beekeepers, or even veteran beekeepers that maybe are going to try using a different treatment that they haven't used before. You can come to this page and you can get a refresher and everything you need to know with this treatment, and you can even watch a video on how it was applied in the hive. So this is, the Honeybee Health Coalition has a lot of really great resources for beekeepers, and it's something that we really recommend people use. And then finally, just more resources. Once again, our website, if you end up losing your Wisconsin Pest Management guide, this handout, if you go to our website, you can print yourself off another copy of it. We have it updated, like I said, every year. Wisconsin put out a Wisconsin Pollinator Protection Plan, if that's something you're interested in, and like improving your property for pollinators as well. And then once again, just the Honeybee Health Coalition, their website is there as well. Just really great resources for beekeepers. And my information, one more time, feel free to email me or give me a call. And then once again, please take our brief survey. Just let us know if the program was helpful, or even just tell us about your operation so we can get kind of a snapshot of the state to figure out what people are using out there. And one of the questions is, do you use synthetic chemicals, organic acids, or essential oils? And it's really interesting how many people, they don't know the treatment options that are out there, and how this presentation kind of helps them with that, but how many people just stick to one treatment throughout the year, and we really encourage you to change them up throughout the seasons. So with that, that is my presentation. And considering how much I talked last year, 8 minutes over is not so bad.
You did fantastic. You can, yeah, you can leave it up there, or you can stop sharing in just a second.
Okay.
What I was going to tell you, the group anyway, is that we purchased some mite kits. So kind of in the theme of what April's going through, we've got 20 mite kits, and we're going to, if there's any members that don't have them, send me the list. And I see you guys are chatting that to Sarah and I. And then after the meeting, we'll get the list of the names, and we'll select 2 people, and we'll get you a mite kit on the club. We're trying to practice kind of how significant it is and how we believe in it. So we'll do that. And then next week, Steve is going to help me with the sugar roll, and we'll do 2 more kits then as well. So if you want to unshare your screen.
Okay.
But from a club's perspective, April, I know we can do some Q&A, but before we do that, I just want to thank you for the time you've taken to put this together and share from an external perspective. This is very well done, and I think it's hit the mark with kind of members from all experience levels.
Good.
I'd agree, and I would say, April, count on every year, same time, same place.
Okay, sounds good. I love you guys. I love talking and hanging out with you guys. So I look forward to seeing you guys every year.
But
I don't know if you saw, you're getting some applauses from Dale and a few others.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions that you've got? Can you stick around for questions?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Does anybody have any questions for April that we didn't get to? Now you're all being shy.
so feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned was rotating your treatments.
Yep.
So if I started out with Formic Pro, what would be a recommendation on that first rotation? Should you rotate by year? For example, if I have to treat this spring and then I have to treat this fall, should I rotate then, or should I rotate next spring? And then what should that rotation be to, or is that up to me?
That's up to you, but at the same time, you could rotate through this year. You can change up your treatments completely next year. I do really like Formic Pro and Mite Away Quick Strips. Personally, in my own beekeeping practices, I can't say enough good things about these treatments, but I do save them for the summer when my honey supers are on. So if you already are doing a Formic Pro treatment this spring, you could do another treatment in the summer. Or you could try to do Hopscard too. The only hesitation I have with that is the fact that it doesn't penetrate the capped brood. And in the summertime, especially when your brood populations are just exploding, your mite levels are growing with that. And so if you do the Hopscard too, but it doesn't penetrate the capped brood, you might be causing more problems in your hive. Does that make sense? So if you did use it this spring and then say you do have an issue when your honey supers are on and you need to do a treatment and you use it again, it's not going to be harmful for your bees. But then next year, think about that and maybe do a different spring treatment and save that one for the summer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the thing about it too is I don't also want you to be wasting your money. So say that you had Mite Away quick strips and you know they're going to expire after this year, they're not going to make it to next year. I understand that beekeeping can be expensive, you know, and so don't overuse it. Like I said, with the Mite Away quick strips, you need to have that month in between the full treatments. But just kind of think about that in the future of maybe do a different treatment in the spring, save those 2 treatments for your summer treatments, and then kind of rotate that way. Does that answer your question? Because, you know, like we have these standards that they do sound really rigid, and we do want people rotating throughout the season and throughout the year. But on a personal level, beekeeping, you have to find out what also is working for you in your operation. And so it's like not trying to judge you, just trying to encourage you to be changing up some of your practices.
Okay, thank you.
April, could you speak a little bit about, you know, there are questions out there around, is it necessary actually to do a mite check, or can you just treat?
Yes, and that I really encourage you to do a mite check. Like I said before, just put a treatment on doesn't mean it works. I've used treatments and I don't know if I got bad batches or they just, for whatever reason, did not work. They were not effective. But I knew that because I did a mite count before. I knew I needed a treatment, and then I did a mite count after. And if you don't see a decrease in your mite levels, then you need to be doing something else in your hive because your treatment wasn't effective. Just because you put it on doesn't mean it works. And that's where I don't want to say it's lazy beekeeping, but you know, these are animals, these are living things that you are forcing to live in this box on your property somewhere. And so you need to be responsible for taking care of them in the best way possible. And doing a mite check, is once you get used to doing it, people think it's intimidating. It's really easy to do. It gives you a really good snapshot on how your hive is doing. And so please get in the habit of just doing those mite checks instead of just throwing on treatments or not really knowing if your treatments worked. Good question. Any other questions?
I have a question about the drone comb that you mentioned.
Okay.
If you add a frame of drone comb and then you remove it before they hatch, and you said you dump them out and you check the brood.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything you need to do to the frame before you can use it again in the future? Do you need to freeze it, or do you need to scrape the wax or anything?
I would scrape it. If you can pull out all the drone comb with an uncapping scraper and save the wax, you could try to do that. There might be some mites still in the comb though, or you can just scrape it off, which the hard thing with doing that is that your bees work really hard to pull wax. It takes 10 pounds of sugar feed to pull out 1 deep frame of wax. And that's something that people don't realize. And so you don't want to be wasting resources, but if you can't get all the drone brood out of there, what you can do is you can throw it in the freezer. You can make sure that all the drones are dead. The varroa mites are all going to be dead because all the drones are going to be dead, and then pull it out of your freezer. And if you have chickens, it's wonderful. They love eating drones. They love it. So, and then you can kind of uncap and try to get all the brood out that way. But if that's too difficult, then you would need to scrape the frame.
Hey,
Okay, thank you.
April, there was a picture that you showed early with larvae that had some mites on them. Could you talk to the group about when you're doing a hive inspection and you pop a box off and you see a bunch of open brood, most people just say, ooh, yuck, look what I did, and they don't see that as an opportunity. Can you
Look at it. Yeah, yeah. And that's when you're doing a mite check with your alcohol wash or your powdered sugar roll. They are very effective. However, it's not a survey of what's happening underneath your brood capping. It's only a survey of what's happening on the adult bees running around your hive. And so when you do split your 2 boxes open and you get that, usually it's that drone comb that's hanging on the bottom, and you open it up and it splits, get your nose in there and get your hive tool in there and get your uncapping scraper in there and start poking around, and you can pull out that dead larva because, well, you just killed it. But look to see if you see any varroa mites that are in there, because with the mite count, you're measuring out 1/2 cup of bees, and so we have a mite level that goes with that for treatment. Unfortunately, we don't have that with, if you uncap, say, 50 drone cells and you find 10 mites, what that means. But visually you can see, okay, you're popping out these drones, you know you have a large drone population in your hive. You popped open, does everyone know what an uncapping scraper is? Is everyone familiar with what that is? It's that little, it almost looks like a little comb that you can take, and because the drone cells are popped out further, you can take that, run horizontal with the drones, and you can actually pop all the tops off, and you can pull the drone larva out on that uncapping scraper. And when you look at that and say it's full, if you see a bunch of mites running around on the butts of that drone larva, you know that, yes, you did an alcohol wash, you only came up with 1 mite, but your mite levels are on the rise. And as soon as that larva hatches out, mites are coming out with that larva. So you need to think about that with your management. Are your degrees, is your daytime temperature going to be above 90 degrees next week or in 2 weeks? Maybe you need to do a treatment now, even though you had a 1 or a 2 in your mite count, because you looked at some of that drone comb that opened up, and you see there's a high mite level that's going to be coming on the horizon. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's like, we do tell people, do not treat unless you know you have a mite count of 3.5 cup of bees. But as you get more experience working in your hive and you start looking at that drone brood and you start popping it open, or noticing that it opened when you opened up your hive, you start seeing a lot of mites in there. You might want to think about, what is my weather forecast coming up? When are these drones going to be hatching out with more mites? Maybe I should put on a Formic Pro or a Mite Away Quick Strip now while I have the chance before it gets too hot out. Does that make sense? Does that also answer did I answer that question, Dave? I like to go down rabbit holes sometimes.
No, it's
all connected.
I know when I did it one time, we just scraped the bottom and I had a whole bunch of it, and I just took it off to the side, and then later I just went through it. And
Yeah.
I know when I was in my first year, it never dawned on me to do that. And I saw somebody do it and I was like, what are you doing? And then I'm like, oh, I missed that.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to see what's going on underneath your brood capping. Because we like control as beekeepers. I know I do.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Any other?
Can I jump in here and let
No.
everyone know the winners of the mite kits?
Ooh.
I got Ben and Stacy get one, and Charlotte wins the other. And if you want to contact Dave, he will work out with getting them to you.
Awesome. Fantastic. And then Sarah, just keep that list and get the rest of them for me. Hopefully the same group will get join in next week Wednesday, and we'll do another 2 next week Wednesday.
Oh,
That's good.
I just opened up the chat window. Can I jump in on some of these questions?
Sure.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Good questions, people. Okay. So this one on the bottom here, I've heard beekeepers sprinkle powdered sugar on the bees as a varroa control technique as they clean off the sugar. Have you seen this? Oh my gosh, I've seen this. Please do not do this. It is not an effective varroa control unless you are able to shake out every single bee in your hive and shake powdered sugar on every single bee. Because the reality is, if you just are sprinkling powdered sugar in there, yes, it's going to hit some of the bees. Yes, they're going to clean it out, but it's not as effective of actually lowering your varroa mite levels. That is such a great question. And it's a couple clubs that I've been to in the last couple of years where it's like something that kind of surges through certain areas of the state at different times. And that's just something that if you want to do it between treatments, that's up to you. But the reality is it's not going to be effective for controlling varroa mites in your hive. Like I said, unless you're able to shake out every single bee, cover every single bee in powdered sugar, and then put them back in the hive. So a great question on that. Thank you for bringing that up. And then another one, oh, sorry, yeah.
I was going to say, we have a family member of one of our members that for 2 years in a row, that's the method they used, and they had 3 hives each year, and they all hives, none of them made it through the winter. So after 6 hives, he said he doesn't know how to do beekeeping, he quit.
Oh, it's not, it's not that he doesn't know beekeeping, it's varroa mite control.
I know, but but he thought the powdered sugar that way was adequate.
Yeah, and it's not, I think where people, and I'm not trying to judge anyone if you've done that before or tried it out in your hives, but it sounds wonderful. Oh, I got powdered sugar in my cupboard. This, if it works, how great is that? But that's where, again, it's so important to do a varroa mite count before you do, if you choose to do a powdered sugar treatment, and then after, and you will see that it did not have an effect on the bees in your hive. So yeah, that's why too, we're talking about all these different treatment options so that you know treatments that are going to be way more effective in your hive and help your bees stay healthy. So great question on that. It's like when I mentioned people were putting rhubarb leaves, there was one summer even I had a pandemic of people putting smashed bananas in their hives. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like I applaud you for trying to do some sort of effort, but it's just, it doesn't, if it's not effective, you're just creating, like bananas in particular, it's for people who have noticed when their hives get angry, you pop it open, you're like, ooh, my hive's angry because I smell banana. It's that same chemical makeup that that pheromone, that attack pheromone is actually found in bananas. And that's why it smells like bananas. And so if you're smashing a banana and putting it in your hive, your bees are going to be agitated. Plus now they have to clean up that banana and get it out of the hive, and it creates a big mess for them. And if you have small hive beetle in the area, they are going to be attracted to that banana because once again, it's that pheromone of attack, of stress. And small hive beetles can pick up on that stress pheromone from your hive from miles away, and they can come and hone in on your hive. And so the problem with some of these techniques, you read about them or you watch a YouTube video about them, but there's no scientific evidence to back up their claims. And you could actually be hurting your hives more than helping them. So yeah, try to stick to our list once again and try to use the products that are available because like I said, they have been formulated in a very specific way to be effective on varroa mites and hopefully not harm your bees.
Amy, there's one more. Yeah, the other question is, have you noticed any correlation between mite levels and either screen bottom board or solid bottoms?
Now, this is an interesting question because if you noticed in my presentation, I mentioned how we encourage people to use screen bottom boards. But have I seen a noticeable difference between the two? I don't know that I necessarily have. If you have solid bottom boards, I'm not telling you to go out and replace all of them with screen bottom boards if you don't want to. The benefit of screen bottom boards is the mites will go out through the bottom. It's extra ventilation for your hive in the summertime. So for my bees, as an example, they sit out in the middle of a clover field. They don't have any shade. So I've noticed I have some with screen bottom boards and some without. And where I haven't necessarily noticed a difference in mite levels because I treat my hives all the same, but I have noticed in ventilation and other aspects that way. So we do recommend screen bottom boards. If it helps, why not do it? They're not hurting your hives. The only thing you have to consider is if you do get a screen bottom board, it's really nice if you can have that insert that shuts it. Otherwise, in the wintertime, when when I'm getting my bees ready for winter, I have to actually put them on a solid bottom board if I don't have that insert to close the bottom board off. So it's those other aspects to think about, like if you are going to purchase a product or make a product for yourself, make sure you do the research to see how it's going to be the most helpful for you and the most helpful for your bees. So we do recommend getting screen bottom boards on your hives, but if you don't have them, it's not necessarily going to be detrimental, but there are positive aspects of having a screen bottom board. And I don't mean to like answer that question without answering it, but sometimes that's part of beekeeping too. It's just, you got to figure out what works for you and your bees and is keeping them healthy and happy.
Maybe we do one more question, if anybody has one.
Any other ones in the?
I'll
I think
ask
we got
one.
them all. Yeah.
I'll ask one is that I also I did some slatted racks that I
Oh, okay. Yep.
and it said it helps from a swarming perspective, but it also said it helps from a mite, but I have never seen anything on it. But I have 2 that we put on.
I put 2 this year as well. I really like them.
I do too.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, is it harming your bees? I don't think that's, not like putting a banana in or something like that, you know, that could potentially harm your bees. The slotted rack, I don't believe it harms your bees, and it could be helpful to them. And so if you wanted to put a few on and see the difference it makes in your own apiary, if you have multiple hives, I say go for it. Because I've nothing against them either. I don't use them personally because I have screen bottom boards on some of mine, but yeah, I think it would be interesting. I've never overwintered with one, and I've heard that the airflow is really good for the wintertime to help also kind of reduce moisture in your hive. So maybe, have you used it in the winter, or do you take it off in the winter?
No, we leave it on all the time. Although last winter, a mouse decided to build its nest in the corner underneath. There's no down there, so I found that this spring. It didn't get up through the wood, but it was. So that's something I have to watch for.
Pros and cons, yep.
Well, I think we're going to end because we probably could keep going for a long time. So,
Right. Yeah.
So April, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Kind of, we've been doing kind of our own education of late, and it's nice to bring someone in with your experience level. So thank you very much.
No problem. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next year. And please take our survey.
Will do.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.